When asked about the arguably world's most famous playwright, most people would tell you that they actually are familiar with at least one of his works. I mean, I bet at least half of the people here have read Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Hamlet, or The Tempest. And they have at least the slightest notion of the themes and topics presented in his works, even if they haven't actually read them. But what makes these plays, these classics, so prevalent and so relevant after over 400 years? And most importantly, what can we learn from these arguably still so highly relevant classics today? It's safe to say that we actually don't know much about Shakespeare's personal life. No, don't worry, this is not a history class. I would, however, like to provide a little bit of context regarding the works and how we perceive them today. So, although derived from the two, I think, most popular traditions at the time, which would be Tudor morality plays and classical aesthetic theory, Shakespeare's plays were written in his own style and developed in their own style in a way that, even though the political context of the Elizabethan era seeps through them, it is still very easy to recognize his own works, and I will elaborate on that a little bit later. Across the 39 plays attributed to Shakespeare, we stretch various themes and notions. The most obvious, the most famous ones, such as love, tragedy, conflict, and fate, to the lesser known ones, somewhat inexplicable, sometimes religious or political themes. This is why these works are so relevant today, because we can take away from them, from these works from 400 years ago, even today, when analyzing them through our own lens, for our own perception. Actually, Shakespeare was a master psychologist before psychology, as we know it today, even existed. His characters are not one-dimensional heroes and villains in this very easy split between them, but they are multi-dimensional. They have lots of layers, and their psychological portraits are very complicated. So let's take, for example, Macbeth. At the beginning, he's a dedicated, loyal soldier, but external pressures, inner turmoil, and psychological factors transform him, turn him into a tyrant. You can see that the battles that he fights are what actually causes his downfall. It is not just about fate. It is about his psychological portrait and the battles he fights and the choices he makes. So that's what we can take away from Shakespeare, that we don't need to only create characters that are black and white, one-dimensional, and following very simple, as we call them, writing rules. We can create our own characters. Take, for example, Iago, the manipulative villain of Othello. He doesn't kill with swords, as you would usually expect. He kills with his words. His manipulation leads to conflict and downfall, and a lot of tragedy. So from that we can learn that even 400 years ago, we recognize that unchecked manipulation is so dangerous to us. And then, of course, we have as we would call him today, the original or ultimate overthinker, which is Hamlet. He is weighed down by grief, overshadowed and overtaken by his own doubts, by his own fears. That is what leads him throughout the play. We see that Shakespeare asks the questions, what actually drives people? What actually makes them act the way they do? So from his play we can derive that morality is not just black and white, and that emotions and human psychology is very layered, is very complex, and we shouldn't just stick to simple labels of a character's good or bad, and instead we should explore human psychology with tenderness and empathy, and ask questions, what makes people act the way they do? What haunts them and what motivates them? Here's one of my absolute favorite aspects of Shakespeare's plays, which is the language. So let's take The Tempest, and don't worry, no spoilers ahead. But it is important to remember that in this particular play, the language and the way it's presented, the way it's described, is intertwined with the entire structure of the play. So when we think about Shakespeare's works and the way that language is used in them, the way it's created, the way it's shaped, it actually reveals yet another hidden floor of the play, which is so fascinating. In this particular case, due to the way that time is constructed in this work, which is by consequent events that happen one after the other and cannot be forgotten, a character's fate is described instead of survived when drowning as undrowned. And this may seem like a bit of a stylistic whim on his part, but it's actually what reveals the playwright's genius. Same with the rhythm of a place, which is arguably one of their most important aspects, and what makes translators so tired, and what makes them struggle so much when translating Shakespeare works. So when you read these plays out loud, or maybe see them in the theater, you see how melodic they are, and how it sounds so beautifully in your ear. So a character that is haunted and embarrassed by his past actions and regrets them is not going to say, oh, I'm embarrassed, I feel bad. He's going to say that his past actions did bast his trespass. And that sounds wonderful. Another very fascinating aspect is that Shakespeare, as we consider it, as we say round it up, wrote around 884,000 words and popularized 1,700 of them. So if you ever acted swaggeringly, been in a hurry, or looked for your eyeballs, congrats, you're unknowingly quoting Shakespeare. And this lesson about how powerful language is, his, dare I say, manipulation and him creating meaning, just shows us how these words have survived till today. And so amazing that these plays still are so relevant today. Now, consider Hamlet's famous soliloquy, to be or not to be. That is the question. These 10 words, so famous, I bet everyone here has heard them at least once in their life, contain the weight of being, the weight of suffering, and doubts and questions that we carry within ourselves. So Shakespeare once again teaches us that the language we speak is not just a tool or a means for communication. It is the way we express ourselves, and it shapes the way we perceive the world, our emotions, our thoughts, and our relationships with other people. The lesson about the power of words is still so relevant today, and it's especially important when we realize that communication is so beautiful. We should choose our words carefully. We should appreciate the beauty of communication, and forever remember and be aware of the fact that the way we speak influences the way we think and the way we perceive reality. And also, Shakespeare proves that a good story really never dies. I bet you've seen The Lion King, that's Hamlet. Maybe you've seen A West Side Story, that's Romeo and Juliet. These plays, Shakespeare's works, have been retold, reshaped, and reinvented basically like 1,000 times or more. And it's because playwrights, novelists, and filmmakers, every year they take away from them, they reshape them, they work in them because the themes presented in these works are so relevant, are so universal, and they're not just unique to us. They transcend any time period, truly. And also, that is because Shakespeare understood the very elements of what we consider good storytelling. So we have conflict, love, fate, redemption, betrayal, power. All these things we see, and they appear in literature and films and everywhere all the time. But he understood that the good storytelling transcends time and place, and that what people read 400 years ago is still what we read today. Take, for example, Romeo and Juliet. On the surface, it is a story about love. We know it, we've seen it, we've read it, we heard it. But beneath it is a story about miscommunication, family feuds, and impulsive decisions. How many times in history, past and present, have divisions between groups caused unnecessary conflict and, furthermore, unnecessary tragedy? Shakespeare forces us to confront this question and to recognize patterns in human behavior that happen over and over and over again. Moreover, his stories are very adaptable. So whether they were performed in Elizabethan England, in the Great Theatre of the Globe, or modern New York, or some sort of futuristic dystopia, these words still continue to move readers and to speak to new generations. So that is because great storytelling is truly timeless. Unfortunately, this is sort of where I come to the conclusion of my speech. Because his works are so omnipresent in pop culture, truly everywhere, we tend to water down and oversimplify them. We tend to think that we know literally everything about them and take them for granted. But that is a double-sided mistake, because readers now deprive themselves of both the tears and joy and emotions one can feel when reading his works, as well as the things and themes hid between the lines. I mean, we see it now with the reception of, for example, the aforementioned soliloquy. Hamlet wasn't actually holding a skull when saying the famous words "to be or not to be." So, what is it that we can learn from Shakespeare now, 400 years ago, as modern readers who struggle with a world that has evolved? Technology has changed, societies have evolved, and we're still stuck with these, what do you want to call it? With these timeless classics on our bookshelves in our libraries. The answer to that question actually is not unambiguous, because there's no universal meaning or lesson that can be learned from Shakespeare's works, as they reflect really ourselves and what's hidden in our souls and in our minds. We can study his works with academic approach. The scholars do it now all the time, and there's still various debates regarding Shakespeare's influences and his religious views, everything about him. But I don't want to talk about that, because it is really not the point. The point is that it is our interpretations, our speculations, our confrontations with the works that really give them meaning and that really make us see both the words on paper and ourselves. So, which is why I would like to encourage everyone here to approach these classics calm, open-minded, and curious, because there's so much you can read between the lines, and truly with each verse you stumble upon something new, something so wonderful, and you discover more about the world and about yourself.